What is a SMaC recipe and what does it stand for? That's the purpose of this lesson, and I want to give you my own personal recipe as well as helping you to create your own. So first of all, SMaC stands for specific, methodical and consistent. And I found this idea in this book on business called Great by Choice, which I thought was absolutely wonderfully written. The idea that Jim Collins and Morten Hansen put forward is that if the world that you are working in is uncertain, fast changing, and takes place in an unforgiving environment, then you need a set of practices that are clear and concrete to help you navigate that world. And these rules should be very clear, repeatable, and give you consistent success in the long term. That way, if you're not sure what to do and what decisions to make, then you've got clear guidance based on the rules that you already know work, because they've been created from reviewing insights about what's already worked previously and why. So it's all very empirical, and then it's based on facts and evidence rather than guesses and assumptions. So you can put your trust in the guidelines because they've proven themselves over time. You can by all means adapt some of these guidelines as time goes on, but they should ideally be open enough to keep the identity and the purpose of the business protected and preserved, while allowing some room for the methods and the ways to practice the rules to be changed. But the thing is, even though this is a great idea for business owners and entrepreneurs, I don't see any reason why this can't apply more widely. You could easily have a SMaC recipe for being a great parent, or a better spouse, or a good friend, or just a general guide to your own life. Given that a lot of the books that I recommend on this channel are all focused around self-discovery and inner work, you could easily come up with your own bespoke recipe for inner work practices as well as just reading habits. Essentially, the question is, what are the guidelines that you need to follow to either get started on something or to go from good to great in something, to reference another of Jim Collins's book. So to keep myself on track as I'm teaching these lessons, I've reflected on what has worked and what hasn't, and I've distilled 15 guidelines or 15 ground rules that I now consciously hold myself to when I'm thinking about Mr. Clarke's classroom. And they were already there, but I've pulled them out of vague unconscious awareness and into my conscious mind so that I can grapple with them and be more intentional about my practice. And that in itself is inner work in action. So hopefully you can see how I'm blending a few of these different elements together. So like I say, as I go through these, think about how a similar recipe could be used in your own life in whichever area it feels just most suitable and relevant to you. And this is my little brown book, which lives in my drawer, so I can check it all the time, and it contains my SMaC recipe for Mr. Clarke's classroom. How to be and stay specific, methodical, and consistent in the long term in 15 points. So let's have a quick little run through of it all. Number 1, teach to the top and scaffold to the bottom. What do I mean by that? This is something which I used in my classroom teaching practice in every single lesson. Rather than simplifying the lesson down to suit the students who might struggle and leave the top attainers bored, instead I pitched the lesson to the higher abilities and then gave out worksheets to help make sure that those who might struggle could keep up. That way, that it could have been like sentence starters or gap fills, or simply just having printouts of the information of the slides so they could access them. But the point was, I wanted to help build them up to be able to access the lesson, not reduce the lesson down in fear that it might not be understood. And I take the exact same approach on here, and I don't and I won't shy away from difficult books or lessons or concepts for that very reason. Number 2, do not avoid jargon, but use it appropriately and only if it is in service to the learning objective. So sometimes specific jargon is necessary to make the point, and sometimes it just gets in the way. So I'm not avoiding jargon in my lessons, but I am using it sparingly and only if it's in service to the lesson itself. So for example, I've used some specific terms when discussing things like Carl Jung and shadow work and persona and active imagination, but I've intentionally avoided using words like individuation and quaternity and in the same lessons, because just a simpler word can be substituted without losing the meaning of those. And that couldn't really be done for shadow or persona or active imagination, and so they stayed in. So I'm not avoiding jargon, but I'm intentionally limiting how much I use so that it doesn't get in the way of what I'm trying to achieve. Number 3, focus only on the quality of the lesson and its delivery, not on the data that relies on the algorithm. In other words, what am I in control of versus what am I not in control of? I can focus on the research, the planning, the delivery, and the editing of the lessons, so I'll double down all my efforts here. What I'm not in control of are the views or the subscribers or the likes that I receive from the lessons, so I don't pay particularly close attention to them. When the feedback from a lesson stands out, then I review it, but again, I focus back on what I'm in control of with that information. Number 4, utilize analog teaching methods for the delivery. Use digital methods minimally and secondarily. So when I say analog teaching, I mean using things like physical props or talking to a camera or drawing things out. I don't mind using digital methods as well, but only if it helps to make the teaching point clearer. So you'll probably see a lot on my videos that there's usually some text on the screen to make a point clear, but otherwise there's none. And at the minute, I'm doing essentially all of my videos as one long take and not editing out any pauses where I fall over my words or anything like that. That might change over time, but again, that's intentional. I don't want this to be perfect. I want this to be real. I make mistakes and I need to stop for a breath sometimes, or I need to think about how I'm going to word something. That's all a part of this process. So I don't want to remove the human aspects of what is ultimately a very human objective that I'm trying to achieve, which is a teacher-student dynamic through teaching lessons and answering questions by replying to the comments as well. Okay, number 5, you'll hear me talk about this one a lot. You probably already have done. Autobibliotherapy. So encourage 2 things. Number 1, a lifelong love of reading in the student, and 2, self-directed healing via the books. Like I say, I use this word all the time and I'm going to keep using it. Auto, referring to the self. Biblio, referring to books or library. And therapy, coming from the Greek, originally referring to healing. So autobibliotherapy is self-directed healing via books. My classroom is all about passing on my love of reading to anyone who will listen to it. So read the books, love the books, and learn from the books. They're the real stars of this show, which leads on quite nicely to, I think, possibly my favourite rule out of all these, which is number 6. Build la biblioteca. That's the name of my library. Read 500 books, reread the best, reread the best of the best, reread the best of the best of the best. So I think this is my favourite rule. I don't know what else to say about it. I think it speaks for itself. I've already made the public commitment to building my library, La Biblioteca, to 500 books, and I'm teaching the insights on the way. The best will filter the top, and I will gladly just pass on those recommendations as and when they do. Number 7, quite a long one. I want to explain this one a little bit further. Respect the masters. Read the books and share the primary sources openly, encouraging others to read for themselves. Hide nothing of the teaching materials from the student. So again, this follows on from the previous 2. Learn from the books, not from me. I'm happy to help summarize and distill a lesson or 2 from a book, but it's about connecting with the author, with the master themselves, which is what will elevate this entire process for you. Spend 6 hours with them reading that book, not 10 minutes with me just on a YouTube video. I see my role as bridging the gap, helping to put you into contact with these amazing authors, and not gatekeeping this information and pretending that I've figured out all these incredible insights on myself. That is absolutely not the purpose of all this. I've loved learning from them and I want the same for you. So I'll give you exercises and questions and structure where I can, but it's in reading the books for yourself that you'll have the biggest breakthroughs. Short one in comparison to all this, completely separate. Pick one platform to post on and to stick to it. Again, I don't think I really need to explain this one. I'm not intentionally splitting my attention unnecessarily across various forms of social media. I'm just picking one main method and having one secondarily to support it. So that's going to be YouTube as my main platform, obviously, and it's going to be just Instagram in the background where people can just chat to me if they want to in my DMs. All right, number 9, Track depth of engagement and returning viewers, not the subscriber count. So the number of subscribers will hopefully increase over time, but again, it's not something I'm in control of. I'm much more interested in returning students and the quality of the comments and how I actually respond to them. So if someone has watched a lesson and then decided to go on to watch another, then I must be doing something right. I just need to analyze what it is and keep doing more of it. Likewise, whether it's a positive or a negative comment is irrelevant. I'm much more interested in how I personally respond because that is in my control. Number 10. Explicitly show how the lessons reinforce and complement each other. They are not standalone pieces of content. Maybe this is just a personal pet peeve. I've mentioned this before. I just really hate the term content and pieces of content. I'm not an influencer or a content creator or whatever the next term might be. I'm a teacher. I've taught for 10 years in person and now I'm teaching online. I'm creating lessons that are part of a wider curriculum, and all the book recommendations are part of the wider suggested reading. I'm not creating content, I'm teaching. And I'm teaching one lesson at a time and showing how all of these lessons combine together to create something much bigger than any individual lesson. The whole is more than the sum of its parts. And I hope that this will prove itself over time as more and more lessons are created and that the sequences of the lessons become clearer. Number 11. More expensive technology does not equate to a better learning experience. Again, I think this one speaks for itself. If I can't articulate what I'm teaching about well, then a fancier microphone won't magically make the lesson better. I need to focus on the research and the reading of the books, and that will make a better and more noticeable impact on the learning experience for you as the student compared to a higher quality resolution from a better camera, for example. Number 12, very closely related. The length of the video should only be dictated by the depth and the purpose of the objective. A 60-minute video isn't better or worse than a 5-minute video. So another way of saying this is putting the focus on the learning objective first and letting everything else follow. So what is in service of the lesson and what is getting in the way of the learning. And time is just as relevant a factor here as anything else. So a big topic just needs more breathing room. If you're interested, by the way, I'm specifically trying to channel slow philosophical granddad energy. And that's what I'm always telling myself whenever I hit record on any of these videos. So it's purposeful and it's intentional, but it just might be a bit of a slower pace than other people online. Again, that's absolutely fine for me. I just want to make my points clear and not rushed. So that's why it's important. Number 13, when making decisions, trust empirical evidence from my lessons and the feedback from the students rather than industry standard practices. I think I've covered this one naturally by explaining the others. I don't really care what others are doing or not doing online. I just care about whether my messaging is resonating with my students. And I'll get that feedback directly from them, either through comments or, like I said before, on Instagram, through direct messages. I'm using the empirical evidence that I've gathered from my previous lessons to learn what works and what doesn't. So I use that evidence rather than assumptions and guesses to guide my next moves. Number 14, second to last one, bit of a longer one, so I want to explain this as well. The student is the hero in their life story. They do not need another hero. They need a guide. So be the guide, give them a plan, and let them live their own journey for themselves. If I remember rightly, and don't quote me on this, but I got this idea from a book called Building a Story Brand. I think it's by somebody called Donald Miller. I'm going to check this just afterwards. And it fits in very nicely with Joseph Campbell's work, Hero with a Thousand Faces as well. So you're the hero in your own journey, and I see my role as the guide within that story. If you like, I'm the Gandalf, I'm the Yoda, I'm the Dumbledore, I'm the Professor Farnsworth, if you're a Futurama fan. For my Final Fantasy VII fans out there, I'm the Bugenhagen. That's what I'm channeling with all of these lessons to get increasingly more and more niche. And the very last one. Do not claim to know everything because you cannot possibly know everything. Teach the importance of the process rather than the outcome. I'm a human being. I'm going to get things wrong. I'm going to teach a lesson imperfectly. I'm going to mess something up which is really simple and really obvious at times, and that's inevitable. I'm focused on the process and making this practical for the long term. So the lessons need to be good enough rather than perfect. Otherwise, I'll never get anything actually out there. The plan then needs to be based around raising the bar gradually in the long term so that good enough naturally improves over time as well. All right, I'm aware that this is going on for about 16 minutes now, so I'm going to leave it there. That's my formalized little guide that I'm keeping myself accountable to. And I'd encourage you to think of an area in your life that you want to improve on, or one where you want to go from good to great in, and start to outline some guidelines to follow. And it might just be 3 or 4 bullet points. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It just needs to be specific, methodical, and consistent. That's what makes it a SMaC recipe. All right, that's the book. That's all from Great by Choice. That's my recipe, and that's the lesson. So I will see you in a future one. See you then.